Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Chicago Cloud Computing User Group. We've got a full room here tonight. There's probably, 200 or 300 people here for those of you watching at home.
And they missed the pizza, too.
And we've got some pizza and some filet mignon as well. So come out next month. We're going to do this all again. We've got a great session. Before we start, a couple logistical things. Please, everyone, silence your cell phones right now. It's a great time to do that. For those of you who have not been here before, the restrooms are right there. Just go out that wall, out that door there, turn left and then right. I don't think there'll be a fire drill, but if there is, same way, out the exits downstairs. We have pizza in the back. Help yourself. There's plenty of it right now. I think that's, and the pizza was provided by ResponsiveX. Eric and April, big hand for ResponsiveX. Thank you so much for sponsoring this. Thanks to Microsoft for providing the space. And thanks to our speaker today. Our speaker is Pete Rodriguez. Pete is a friend and colleague of mine. I've known him for the 3 years that I've worked on this team. And this is the second time this week that Pete has helped me out. Earlier this week, I organized a training session for one of our partners, and I needed people to help to deliver some of the training. Pete stepped up right away, raised his hand, and said, "I will do it for beer."
He's not lying.
He was probably joking, but just in case.
Oh, there you go.
This is for you, Pete.
Thank you,
this
David.
Is some beer. I forgot to bring an opener.
No,
That's the only thing.
I'll wait we'll see how it goes first.
It might not be cold.
I'll tell you why I asked for the beer, because one of the sessions that I had to deliver was on migrating Python 2.x to Python 3 using Copilot.
Oh, you need a beer.
And I've worked for Microsoft for 26 years, and it's barely enough for me to know regular Python, let alone go back 25 years, right, to Python 2. But thank you, David.
That's worth 2 beers.
That's worth at least 2
All right,
beers.
stick around later on.
Yeah.
I'll get that second beer to you. Pete is an architect, a partner solution architect. He's been working for Microsoft for 125 years. He's loads of experience, terrific speaker. Please give a warm welcome to Pete Rodriguez.
Thank you, David. So today we're going to be talking about leveraging GitHub Copilot for accelerating your cloud journey. The reason I put an asterisk on there is because this is going to be focused on Azure, right? Technically, you could use it for other clouds, but we're not really going to focus on that quite as much. And don't worry if you're not a developer, because there are plenty of sessions you can find on YouTube and such that talk about using GitHub Copilot from a developer perspective. And if you are a developer, that's great. But really what we're going to focus on a bit more is how you can use this for delivering cloud artifacts like templates and scripts. Quick agenda here. We'll talk also about the different modes in Copilot. So you'll see that in action. Do a little bit of what we call vibe coding, right? I'll start with basically a blank slate and show you how you can create a couple of interesting things like a SQL deployment. And we'll end up with just what are some considerations and limitations you should know about before you start diving into this. So what is GitHub Copilot? Has anyone tried it before? I know you have, David. So maybe about half the room here. So what it is, it's an AI-powered coding agent that you can use that can definitely accelerate how much time it takes for you to build code, as well as the artifacts that I was mentioning before. You're using natural language in a chat interface, right? And it can integrate with your developer environment of choice. I happen to use Visual Studio Code, but if you're using regular Visual Studio or JetBrains, that also works. But I'll admit the only one I've tried it with myself is Visual Studio Code. Is anyone using it with a different IDE? Just curious. Which one are you using? Say it again.
PyCharm from JetBrains.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess it's the one that's up there. How well integrated? Not to put you on the spot, I'm just curious. Does it feel like it's part of the same experience, or is it like a separate window type deal?
It's well integrated, but the features, they come like quite late. For example, the agent one,
Yes.
you have
Okay, so for those that may not have heard the audio, he said it is integrated, but it takes a little longer to get updates compared to Visual Studio Code. We do support multiple programming languages with this, as you'll see, and you can pick from a variety of different large language models inside of the chat, and I will show that too. So how it's used, it definitely has boosted my own productivity. I'll give an example. So earlier in the year, we were building these hackathons on AI, and one of the deployment scripts was originally written in PowerShell. We're Microsoft. We like PowerShell, right? However, we decided it would be preferable to have that same deployment script available in Bash. And so we ported it over, or I did actually, ported it over from PowerShell to Bash. And it probably got me about 95% of the way there, which was great. There was a subtle bug that I had to catch later, but it was because it was kind of an odd thing the author was doing to do some logic, and so I figured out what it was doing and I was able to fix it. But that's another thing that this is really great at, is when you have a problem, you can take the output from the terminal window that has the error in it, and I'm probably not going to have a chance to show that today, but you can just grab that, throw it right in the chat, and say, what's going on here? And it will try to decipher what's happening. And it definitely has helped me find bugs and errors with my scripts. You can also use it to brainstorm. Has anyone heard the term vibe coding before? You know what I'm talking about? Because it's kind of a loosey-goosey term in my opinion. But the idea is that you can just kind of ideate on the fly and just try things with GitHub Copilot until you get the result you want. So maybe it didn't quite do what you expected, or maybe you need a little more than what it's suggesting, and you can on the fly make changes. You'll see a little of that. And the other idea is that you can stay in the editor, right? Back in the old days, like a couple years ago, before we had this, what you would end up doing is oftentimes using your search engine of choice, try to find something similar to what you were, Bing, exactly. What you were trying to do, probably get something back from Stack Overflow, right? It's like, oh, that might be it. Try it, nope, doesn't work. Keep searching. You definitely took a lot longer to get through that process compared to just doing it right in the chat. Some examples, another thing I love about it is it's kind of watching what you're doing, and it can convert comments directly into code. And I'll show you that in a second. So yeah, you just start typing away and say, I need to generate a function that can figure out the sum of two numbers. Boom, it'll do it. That's an easy one, right? But other examples is if you have something that's similar and it can, like I've started typing in this example, const seconds equals 3600, const minutes equals that. It'll look at what I'm trying to do and generate the rest for me. Now, I don't have to accept that if I think that's not what I wanted, but it's great that it can do that on the fly. And then it might also find alternative ways of doing what you're trying to do that might be more efficient. So this is an animated demo, and what it's doing is it's going to generate a function in Python that is using regular expressions. And the joke you've probably heard before is, you're trying to do something with pattern matching, and you think you might have to do regular expressions. And now you have two problems, right? Because now you have to use regular expressions. And if you look at the syntax, there's no way in heck I would ever remember how to do that, right? So another benefit of GitHub Copilot is it removes the barriers when it comes to the nuances of syntax for whatever language you're trying to use. But very cool stuff. Okay, I also mentioned that there were various modes in GitHub Copilot and also various models, right, on the earlier slide. A few things here. You can choose which one you want to use when it comes to how much it's going to intervene with you in the code window. right? So the first one is called Ask Mode, and you can just use it for Q&A without it really touching your code. So if you want to know what something's doing, it's non-invasive, use Ask Mode. I'm going to show that one in a second. Actually, I'm going to show all of these. But the second one, Edit, is probably a little less obvious as to what it does. What you do is you pick what parts of your application, like various scripts or style sheets or HTML, whatever it happens to be, and you add them as context into that chat window. And it's only going to do stuff with those, right? It's not going to touch all the other stuff that's in your code base. So that can be useful so you are aware that what is going to be changed. And then the last one, which is the most adventurous mode, in my opinion, is agent mode. That's where it can just do anything, right? Think of like a self-driving car. You know, it could do that. And what's cool too is that it can even interact with the terminal window. So if you were creating a bash script, for example, and I don't know, how many of you worked with bash before? You know that you can't just run it, right? You have to do a permissions change so that it can execute change mod, right? So it will do the change mod for you and drop that right into the terminal window, but it asks permission before it's allowed to do it. So that's also nice. But that's what I tend to use a lot. I mean, yeah, as I'm typing in the code window, you'll get the inline suggestions. That also is true. But agent mode, I feel, is like the most powerful mode of the three. You can go back between them whenever you want, so you don't have to stick with one. Okay, so let's do a little demo here. And it's possible that my code space may have timed out, so is anyone, yeah, it did. Is anyone familiar with GitHub Codespaces? A few. All right, let me explain that real quick. So what GitHub Codespaces lets you do is you get a container that's running in the cloud that has an environment that you can work with very easily, right? So if you look, notice I'm in the browser. I know it's at the very top of this screen. And the URL is upgraded waffle. It comes up with these random names. But in a few seconds, it will rehydrate itself. Apologies for not doing that before we started. I forgot. But the reason it does that is because I'm getting charged money, technically, right? You get 150 hours, I believe, a month for free. But in order for it to be cost efficient, it basically suspends your code space when you're not using it, which I wasn't. I was eating pizza, so that's why it went away. But okay, I took this example from a repo that David had mentioned that we worked on earlier in the week with another partner, and we delivered that training with them. It's actually, and I put this in the resources at the end, but if you're wanting to learn GitHub Copilot, it's fantastic, right? And it has the hooks into the code spaces so that you don't have to touch your desktop at all. But that's what this is. So what I'm going to do first is, and let me make sure I can do this, because I know it's a little hard to see. All right. I put Zoom it on my machine here. So if you look in the lower right corner, this is where I can see what modes are available. Ask, Edit, and agent mode. There's a keyboard shortcut for agent mode because it's the one that is, as I mentioned, probably the most powerful, so I tend to hit Control-Shift-I when I don't see this window on the right myself. The other thing I wanted to highlight here is all of the models that are available to me. Now, a common question is, what's the best one? And to me, that's like asking, well, who's the best developer? Right? It's like, is it Linus Torvalds? Is it Dave Cutler? Larry Wall? Whoever, right? There's no real answer to that. It depends on what expertise you're looking for. They're each trained on different things, and so they might have a different speciality compared to some of the other models. Now, that being said, a lot of people like Claude, but your mileage may vary. I encourage you to try different ones. And actually, there's like a YouTube video by a guy named Dave Plummer, ex-Microsoft guy. He has a podcast called Dave's Garage that I like, and he compares various ones. Now, he did it like 6 months ago, so it's possible it's out of date. But again, doesn't hurt to try different ones to see what happens when you do it. This list is always changing. And the other thing that's interesting is if we go from ask to agent mode, sorry, do that again, and pick that same list, notice it's a little shorter. And the reason why is because not all the models are good at dealing with the terminal window. So that's why we have a more condensed list. But right now I have it set to GPT 4.1. Yes, David?
What's that auto thing at the top?
So that one, if I remember correctly, and keep me honest because you delivered this part of the training last week, it will, based on your text that you put in the chat, try to pick the most efficient model, right? So I was listening to David because he delivered that. I was in the background as an attendee.
That's not,
Yeah.
it's not exactly true today.
Okay, correct me.
Long term, that is what it will do.
Yeah.
Today, what it does is picks the most efficient model for capacity in the Azure data centers.
Gotcha.
So it's
Interesting.
optimization for you, not us.
Okay.
But long term,
It will do
what
that.
David said it would.
Yeah. Well, good to know.
Turns out these things require
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, yes, they do require different levels of horsepower, and we charge different amounts of money based on which ones you pick, right? So if you notice on the right, some of them say 0x, some of them say 1x, some of them say 0.33x. The reason for that is because of billing. And the other thing to know, because I don't know how many of you work for companies that might care about, like, where's my code going, right? Well, for the GPT ones, Microsoft hosts them within their data centers. The Claude ones are not hosted by Microsoft. They're hosted by Anthropic, different company. So if you're putting code in there, I don't know what they do with it. They do what they do with it, right? So you'd want to check their terms and conditions when it comes to how they handle that. But I know this because there was an internal thing going on recently. I'm like, oh, I never thought of that. But it makes sense because we don't host Claude. And you're looking at me quizzically.
Yeah, because they're still hosted in AI Foundry. The models are still
They're still there, but it's actually calling out for that one. It's Anthropic doesn't allow us to host Claude today.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
You're like,
it could change.
You're 100% sure on that?
That's what, yeah, I saw it. I could look, send me an email and then I can send you maybe a snippet of the thread. I don't know how much of it I can share, but I was shocked by that because it's something to know. The other thing I was going to show is I mentioned the billing, and I think it's if I click this little icon on the lower right, I can keep track of how many premium requests I've made. So if you're worried about running out of money, that's something you can do. It's not very obvious because you got to click the little Copilot icon in the lower right. All right, so getting back to our demo with actual code here. First, let's go ahead and run this thing. And I admit, I'm probably going to be a bit more perplexed when it comes to running things in the browser. So I prefer to work in Visual Studio Code. So one thing I can do is come over here. I clicked on the lower left corner where it says Code Spaces, Upgraded Waffle, and I'm going to select Open in VS Code, Desktop. And in a couple seconds, what will happen is it will use Visual Studio Code on my desktop, but open the code space that's running remotely in the cloud. So it's a little bit of a mind game, because when you open the terminal here, you might think that you're opening up a terminal on your own machine, but you're not, right? You're opening the one in the cloud somewhere. Okay, so while that's coming up, I will open up this, what looks to be like, is that okay, or should I make it a little bigger? You don't really need to look at the code. But is that, yeah, that looks pretty good. What I'm going to do is just put this back in ask mode, since we haven't tried that one yet. I feel like I have pizza oil on my fingertips, and so my trackpad isn't working as well. Okay, just ask it, what does this do? And get rid of this, because the code space is still going. Ignore it. This is happening because of the fact that it's starting up again, and it's working. Oh, thank you, David. And if it doesn't work here, we'll go back to the browser, because it seems to be a little slower than I was expecting. Let's go back over here, just in case.
Quick question.
Yeah, please.
So how is it synchronizing between the one on your laptop and the code base on the cloud?
How is it synchronizing?
Yeah, like both are running at the same time, right?
Yeah, it's the same environment. I'm just connected to it in two different ways.
Through GitHub, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
Here, locally, unless you check in,
Right.
it's not going to get reflected over there.
Correct.
Right.
All right, so this is a new thing. I wonder if it's because I'm in the office, because I tried this earlier, and it seems to be misbehaving. Give me 1 second. All right. Let's just, maybe Visual Studio Code was taking a little longer. Okay, I was just not patient. I don't know if you believe me, but it did ultimately come back, right? So if you see at the top where it says, looking at the app PY file, this is a high school management system API built with Fast API. So I was just a little impatient, didn't wait for it to come back. Probably slow because it was starting it up. So that's nice, because if I've never seen this code before, I may not know what the heck it does, right? So this gave me a quick way to understand at a high level what this thing is doing. So it's like a simple web app for a high school, and I'll show it to you in a second, that lets me look at students. So let's go ahead and try it out. The window's a little cut off because of Zoom. Let me bring it down a little. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and run it. It's a Python application.
Sure looks like it regurgitated that nice header comment at the top, but, you know.
It looks sort of like that, yeah.
But, yeah.
Okay, open in browser. It's running on port 8000. There it is, fabulous application, right? Now, the next thing, I showed you ask mode, although it was a little disjointed, but if we go back and look at the chat history at the top, it would have where I asked it to tell me what this thing does. The next thing I want to do is show you edit mode, and when I do that, whoa. That's weird. The screen blanked out. Did it blank out over there? That's weird. Okay. So it has to reset the context. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm able to control what files it's looking at for this. So I don't want it to look at everything. In fact, I'm going to remove the Python file. And I'm going to select these three, this JavaScript file, this HTML, and this style sheet, and drag it over. It's always hard to do this with a trackpad. Okay, so now I have app.js, index, HTML, and style sheet. And I have a pre-canned thing I'm going to have it do. It's a lot more text than I want you guys to watch me typing, so let's do that. Okay, so it says, please edit the activity cards, add a participant section. It will show what participants that already signed up for that activity as a bulleted list. Remember to make it pretty. So it's going to work for a while. Okay, there it goes. Okay. It started to talk about what it was going to do, and then it's like, all right, I'll do it for you. Now notice, before I do anything, that I have the ability to check out what it's suggested. And if I like it, I can keep it. If I don't like it, I can say undo. No harm done, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit keep for all of these changes. I could go through each one if I want to and see what it's doing for me. Since we had a style sheet, HTML, and JavaScript, it made changes to all three. Okay, so we're still running. I don't remember if it watches what I'm doing and restarts, but just in case it doesn't, I'm going to just restart debugging. Does anyone remember what it was supposed to do?
If you make changes to app.py, it will not auto-reload app.py.
Got it.
If you make changes to HTML, it will auto-reload.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, so where do I go to see the change, David, since you remember it? Do I click on one of these? Or was it was the activity, right? We don't really have to check it, but you saw it make changes to the code, right? That's all I was expecting to do. Oh, yeah, there it is. I just had to hit refresh in the browser. So now there's more stuff. Okay? Then the last one, which is agent mode, my favorite. Let's come back to code, which is behind this window. Okay. We are going to flip this to agent mode. Again, you get the message, the chat mode is going to end. I'll say yes. And this time, I'm going to ask it to please add a delete icon to each participant and hide the bullet points. Okay. Did it get all of it? Yeah, okay. Now, right now I'm using Claude Sonnet, right? Doesn't really, it should still work, but I've noticed that some of the models take longer. So if you value speed over, let's call it depth, for lack of a better word, then you might experiment with that and see. The demos we're going to do later take a very long time, so we might have to get more pizza or cookies or something while it's going. But I did do that kind of like cooking show style, so you'll see that in a second. All right, so there are a lot more changes here. And as you can see, I was just talking just to fill up time because it's still working in the background. But it's doing a lot more things. That's the reason. Now you can follow along and see what it's doing at each step. Right now it's trying to add the delete. Now, a common question I get is, well, what happens if you change stuff right now? It's still running. What do you think happens? Actually, it's watching, and yeah. It's not a good idea. Well, I feel like it's a little bit risky, but technically what it does, it is still watching what you're doing, and it will adjust the path from that point forward, but it's possible that it might have to undo things that it's already done if you change the intent. So my recommendation is don't touch the files it's touching, but you could try it and see what happens. I'm a little scared of it myself. I just prefer Like I said, get more pizza or coffee or cookies. Okay, so it's done. Again, I'm gonna do what's not recommended in the interest of time and just keep everything. You shouldn't do what I just did. I know I'm doing it, but you should look and see what the heck it's saying it's gonna do. All right, so again, just to be completely safe, I'm going to stop and rerun this thing. If I were at home, I probably would be using the key command, but not only would you not be able to see that, but I have to hit a key to get the function key, so that always throws me off. I'm not used to hitting FN. Okay, so let's open the browser. Okay, so now this red X wasn't there, right? So you can delete people just by clicking it, so let's try that. So this is all new functionality that Copilot just added for me. Don't know if it actually works, but okay, I think it did it. Let's hit refresh. Oh, I don't know if I have to pick one of these. Doesn't matter, again, if it doesn't work, you get the idea, right? But it might also be, I'm not gonna do this, but if you were really doing this, you might also tell it, hey, I tried this, it didn't work. How come it's not working? And then you could watch it, try to figure it out. And in real life, I do that, right? Because like right now, and David just left, so I can't ask him. It's like when I hit the X, it looks like it's gonna work, but then I get not found. So something's up. Okay, so let's go back to the deck. How are we doing on time? All right, 6:52. Okay, so this is a very dense slide. You don't have to decipher everything here, but I just wanted one place to kind of talk about, well, how does this all work under the hood, and what are some things that you should know about, right? So we talked about how it uses large language models, multimodal architecture for your code across the whole life cycle. I don't have anything in here that shows like integrating with GitHub itself for like pushing code into the repo or kicking off actions or anything like that, but that's all possible right from GitHub Copilot. Originally, it was powered off of OpenAI's Codex, a descendant of GPT-3. That's old, right, by today's standards, but it's been around for multiple years. I showed how we support models from different companies, so it's not just OpenAI. We have Google too, which is interesting because I don't think Google is in AI Foundry right now, but we do have it in Copilot. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight in this was the fact that that GitHub Copilot is using code that came from public GitHub repositories. So it's possible your code was in there to train it if you write code, which is interesting. There you go. It won't use private code unless you opt into that. Because that's another common question I get is, can you have it use my company's repo so that it will take that into account when it generates new code, which is a valid point, right? You probably want it to take into account your company's coding styles and such. There are ways to do things like instructions, custom instructions and such, so it follows specific coding conventions. Bit beyond the scope of today, because I do want to get to the infrastructure as code part, but just know that it can do that. Oh, sorry. Yes.
You mentioned public code versus private code.
Yes.
And that GitHub Copilot accesses, I don't know what's specifically is the difference. I know public code is accessible,
Yes.
but when you make your code private, there's an assumption that no one can access it. So what?
The large language model that was trained at the time it was trained was only looking at public repositories off of GitHub. So anything within your company's environment, if you have a private GitHub repo or maybe Azure DevOps even, right? That whole thing. It doesn't come up as much as it used to, but still out there. Like that's not going to be available to GitHub Copilot. There are ways to add it, though, if you wanted it to also use
That's what I
that.
mean. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so there are, I actually haven't done it, and that's an interesting thing, because David, I don't know if you happen to know that one, but if I wanted to
You can hack
explicitly,
into someone's
there's a
private-
way to do it. I don't know if you would do it through fine tuning or MCP server. There's probably multiple ways to get it in there.
It
But-
wouldn't it still wouldn't train the public model.
That's right. It's never going to do that.
Yeah. So you don't have to worry about that happening.
Yeah.
It's just training the fundamental like foundation models on public code.
It's just using it as output for
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
process.
And just to remind everybody, when it comes to AI, right, there's two parts to it. There's the training side, and then there's the prompting side. So if we were to do anything, it would have to happen either by fine-tuning the model, which would be the training side, or you could do it through what happens when somebody prompts, that maybe at that point it goes and looks out and tries to find something with your company's repo. So I have to look that up because I don't really remember how I would do it. And I don't know, David, I don't know if you heard the question. The question is, how do I configure GitHub Copilot to look at my private company's repositories? And I haven't tried to do that myself, so. It is possible, though. I know that. Yeah, with Foundry, that's a thing you can do.
Quick question.
Yes,
So when you mention public code, it
Yes.
means public code on public GitHub
that's right.
or other code publicly available, not private code on public GitHub.
Not private, correct, because it
So
won't be
there
able to get to
can be
those.
Private repositories and.
That's
public
right.
ones, right?
Yes, yeah, you can choose to make a repo private in GitHub.
Most of the time we will be working on any code that will be checked out on our local processes. I mean, even if we're working in my company, I would want directly ask the pilot to make the change to GitHub reports. So I will check it out on my local and then make the changes and then push it.
Yeah, I mean, that still works the same way. So where you're doing local commits, and then when you're ready, you do a commit back to the remote repo, right? What we're talking about, though, is what if you wanted GitHub Copilot to have knowledge of all the code that your company's ever made before, and take that into account when it generates new code, like what we just saw in agent mode or edit mode, right? That's what we're talking about, because you might have specific styles of how you write code. Go ahead, David. Well, there's that too. There's the instructions.
You have an instruction file.
Yeah.
Explicitly tell it, these are my coding standards, these are the libraries that I use, things like that. I don't know, I had to try this, but could you tell it, look in this repository? And use the same style. That's really interesting.
So we're all wondering about this. I'm like, well, why don't we just ask Copilot, right? So can you, let's just do that. So,
And then in MCP you have instructions. And then there are like config files that you need to, I have
You would
done
extend
it.
it with MCP, that makes sense.
And then I've done it in person. So in person you can install one more plugin like Node.js. And then there's a configuration that you can configure in person, where you can say, look at this private code. And then that also has one more config to get the authentication, like local authentication within the company. So that is awesome authentication. And then once it is authenticated, it is able to look at the code. So those codes are called Boulder Duck. Boulder Duck is like all the code that all the
see, it's not.
create, like they create it so that anyone using their product can, that's what they create as instructions, and then accordingly.
Oh, you can't see mine.
Or RAG style approach, right? You're providing the information to the prompt, and then,
Yeah, so that actually, when it looks like the golden level, it means that
Yeah, see, it's not really there yet. If you, at least according to this, so again, Copilot output, take with a grain of salt, but what I think we're looking for the last part where it says Copilot Enterprise will integrate with your company's internal documentation and code base before it generates stuff, right? Because what David was saying is true. You can add the custom instructions, define naming conventions and such, but it's not actually looking at your private company's repo. The way the public models were trained, right?
Talking about a completely new installation of ChatGPT and Copilot, probably that's what. So Cheese has something like that in their own data center for their developers. I don't know exactly, obviously, what they've done, but they have their own private ChatGPT and Copilot and all that stuff set up in their own data center. So their code doesn't go out, all their document searching and all that stuff is contained in their data.
Thank you. All right, so I wanted to pivot because up to this point, we've been talking about GitHub Copilot more from a developer-ish perspective, right? But the title of today's talk was talking about accelerating your cloud journey. And so what I'm going to show you now are some things that can help for building those cloud artifacts. So the first one, this is actually a Visual Studio Code extension called GitHub Copilot for Azure. And if you're watching what's happening here, there's, and I didn't show you this earlier, but I will, is you get these @ commands that you can type in the chat window, and one of them is @Azure. So let's give that a whirl. But the kinds of things it can do is it can create Azure-related code and infrastructure as code for you. So let's get to that. All right, oops, jumped ahead. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code, let's try this one. And I need PowerPoint on my own screen so I know what to type. Can you see that? Or I should probably zoom in, right? Okay, better? All right, let's see if that works. It might take a second the first time. Hopefully it won't take too long. But as you saw, I used the @Azure. So now it's saying generating Azure Resource Graph Query. It's running, summarizing results. Took a little time the first time. But what's interesting too is that it actually has the Kusto query, that's what it's called, down in the lower right here. If I wanted to run this in the Azure portal, I could do it that way. But it also told me in plain English, I have data store for MXBGI. I don't even remember what that is, but I have 2 storage accounts right out there. Let me unzoom because it's a little bit hard to see the context. How about this one? Can you tell me if I have any VMs running? Maybe I forgot about it, right? If you leave something running in Azure, it's like leaving the faucet on in your house. It's like you're paying for it. So I don't have any virtual machines. That's good. Because even though I work for Microsoft, and you would think, oh, you work for Microsoft, it doesn't cost anything if you leave Azure stuff on. That's not true. It doesn't cost me, but it costs somebody's cost center money. Yes?
How is it recognizing what subscriptions?
Perfect question. So what I didn't show you is at some point I had to log in, right? So I did have to authenticate. And if I do this like change tenant thing, then I could pick from different tenants that I have access to. But I also had to log in. I'm not going to try to do that because I'll probably screw up my environment. But yeah, I did log into Azure in Visual Studio Code so that I could run commands. Because otherwise it doesn't know which Azure environment I'm talking about, right? But yeah, in this list, the one I'm using is the Microsoft non-production. But that's how you do that.
Configure all these environments. How do you configure all these environments so you can have 10 different environments?
You could have as many environments as you have access to. So if somebody gave you access to their Azure and you log in with an identity that has access to it, then it would show up in this list.
Oh, it's just.
It's a tenant,
You
yeah.
don't have to configure it.
No. I'm using my @Microsoft.com credential. That's why I see all those. All right, so let's try one that's a little more fun. How much money did I spend this month? And I'm leaving off a part that I was planning because it says, I need the name of or ID of your Azure subscription. So I can say use subscription, this one. Actually, what's interesting is I can even just type the GUID in there without anything. Because as humans, we probably care about this. But if I just do this, and no, I don't have that memorized, but it will repeat the last command, right? Use that subscription ID as part of the context, and then tell me. So it looks like I spent $49.07 on charges. Not bad. Most of it was, as you are probably not surprised, Azure AI Services, which we used to call cognitive search. Azure AI Search. That's what that is. Still not bad, though. I'm not going to get an email from my manager about this one. Okay, so how are we doing? 7:07, all right. So what if I was wondering about this one? I say, I don't think I need those search services. Because this is a very common thing. You forget that you had stuff on. Okay, it tells me which ones they are. So I'm just going to say, well, can you delete them? Okay, that's all I wanted to really show you there is this is non-destructive, right? So it's telling me it doesn't have the capability to delete, which is probably a good thing, right? But if I wanted it to, I could say, can you show me how to do that using the Azure CLI? Let's see what it does. And that'll be the last one for this. So did it work? Yes, AZ search service delete has the names already there. So back in the old days, what I would have probably had to do is type some Azure CLI commands to list out which search services I have. Then I get the name. I have to know the resource group, so I have to do the same thing for finding the resource groups. So this was definitely better. So pretty cool, right? Okay, any questions on that before I move to the next topic? Actually, this one's kind of similar, so let me, but yes, questions, anybody? All right. So another thing you can do is have it construct Azure CLI commands for you. Also a very common thing you do. I don't know if you prefer to do things in templates and deployment scripts. I do, but there are still plenty of companies that write scripts in Bash or PowerShell. So this is something else that can make that easier, and you can see it going. I did have some things here, but just to make sure we get to the meaty demo, as I'm calling it, I'm going to gloss past that part. So, okay, so what if you don't write pro code? Can GitHub Copilot still matter to you? Right? And the answer is yes, because you can use it to help you create bicep templates and deployment scripts. That's what I want to show you now. Okay, so just in case The other demo takes too long. There's this one that I have in here. And so what got asked first is, can you help me create a bicep file to deploy Azure DB from MySQL? And if you're watching the screen, it's generating the bicep template for you. But it's very short, so I'm going to try it live. As I mentioned, sometimes this can be kind of slow. Let me get over here. Actually, okay. Here's the prompt. I want to deploy a 2-node SQL Server cluster in Azure in an availability group on Windows Server 2025 and SQL Server 2022 in Bicep. And we'll see what it does. Like I said, it does take a little time. What's interesting, as you'll see, is that it knows that that has to go into an Azure Virtual Network. So it's also going to create Bicep files for me for the VNet. So it's still thinking. It showed me stuff in there as long as I was in agent mode. Did it?
You were in agent mode, but you had Azure.
Oh, sorry, you're right. That was wrong. Get rid of that. Okay, do it again. Thank you for noticing. I didn't notice that. That was from the last demo. There, I think. Okay, so sure, use best practices, always a good idea. I actually hadn't, I added the Azure MCP server for a later thing and actually realized I haven't actually tried this with that enabled. So let's see what it does. It does say experimental, worries me a little bit. But just in case it blows up, like I said, I did the cooking show thing where I have another Visual Studio Code open where I can bring it up already done. But I'm curious if it's going to work, so let's just give it a few more seconds. It does take time. What do you guys think? Do you want to keep waiting, or do you want to see what it did?
Step 1 of 6.
Yeah, let's see what it does. Oh, well, it's starting to do something.
I think one thing that's important here is to call out is what it does to begin with. So it says created 6 to-dos. So oftentimes when working with GitHub Copilot or any agent like this, the first thing it does is some sort of planning step.
Yes.
And that's super important. Even when you're doing things, if you can really clearly define what it is that you're doing with all the context, that will help in planning the work, the tasks that it has to do to fulfill it. And so, yeah, you see that right off the bat. Created 6 to-dos, and so now it's holding on to those 6 to-dos and working those in like a sequential sort of way, which is super important because it has to do the same thing that we do.
Yeah, exactly.
Break the big problem down into small, actionable steps.
But the other thing you'll probably figure out eventually, too, is that the quality of your prompt impacts the quality of the output. So if you were to say, I need a SQL server, well, you didn't tell it much, right? So it's going to try to do it, but you might find that it's not how you want it. So you'll have to keep making changes until you get it to be there. If you know more up front, the output will be better when it comes out. So I think, like I said, I don't know if we want to keep waiting. I'm getting a little impatient myself. But yeah, I did this same thing earlier. And let me get that up on the screen. It may end up with this, but like I said, I don't want to waste too much time. Okay, so if you look at this, it generated a bunch of bicep files, right? So one's for SQL VMs, one's for networking, load balancer. I told it I wanted it in an availability group, which requires an Azure load balancer from what I remember about setting up SQL on virtual machines. It created a parameter file. And then the other thing it did is it created a deployment script in Bash to get this going. So this is a lot of stuff. If I had to do this from scratch, which I've done, it would take me a long time. Because, I mean, what I would have probably done in the old days is gone to the Azure Quick Start templates, downloaded something from there, and messed with it until I got it working. I mean, one of the hard things, especially with, hopefully you're not doing a ton of stuff on VMs, but a lot of people still are, is that things are always changing. And with like SQL environments, it's very important you have good storage. And so like we have Elastic SAN, I think it's still in preview. You might want to use that because SQL admins tend to like SANs for some reason. And before, the way I would do this was like with storage spaces in Windows Server, right? Which is less familiar to that. But that's something else you can even do with this, is you could tell it to add a bunch of disks and have it format the drives and all of that good stuff. The other thing I did, which I could, and I'm going to go back to the other window because I'm curious to see how far it got, is it originally only did the Bash script, but I also prompted it to convert it to PowerShell, in case you have anybody that likes PowerShell. Right, so it went through it. Now I haven't checked this for syntax and made sure that it's working. What's interesting is it looks like it put a CLI command in a try catch block. That doesn't look quite right to me, because I would want to use the Azure PowerShell way of doing deployments, which is not this. But quickly looking at this, that looks a little goofy. I can fix it. Still, it probably saved me time because it's less work that I would have to do. It looks like it's going to try to go ahead and deploy it for me too, which I don't really need it to do, but. It put everything in one file too, which I don't like. So when I did it the other way, it wasn't with that MCP server, which we're going to talk about in a second. So I'm wondering if that was the reason. But I could tell it now. I just don't want to waste your time. It's like, well, thank you, but I want this in separate files. If you want, I can try it and see what it does. I have actually tried that before. I'm doing this on the fly because I'm curious. But yeah, it's more typical to split up your bicep file so you don't have one big monolithic file, right? Because that's hard to deal with. Yeah, now it's going. So create a modules directory. But eventually we should get to a similar point to what I already showed you. This is more vibe coding style actually, because I could keep telling it things like, okay, I don't like how you did the disks. Can you change that? And say I want an Elastic SAN or something else for that. But now you can see it started to create multiple files, right? In the upper left. Networking.bicep, storage.bicep. It's doing its thing. All right, let's move to this guy. So this Azure MCP server that I left on is actually in preview, as we probably saw. But the idea is that it enables you to work with AI agents for Azure. So you can just use natural language to work within your code. You could even say, deploy a VM on Linux or something like that in a chat in the application. I think that's the next screenshot in here somewhere. Actually, no, I didn't capture that one. But yeah, that's how it could work. And it's interesting because you could have an agent that could deploy things in Azure itself using this. Okay, and then this is in preview. It stands for Site Reliability Engineering. Thank you. But the idea with this guy is that it's an autonomous agent that can look at what's going on in Azure and then act on it. So maybe it sees that your app server that's running is at 100% CPU, and it can take action on its own to scale that up, right? Of course, this works with PaaS services like Azure App Service too, so maybe you don't have enough instances of that going, and so it can also add additional instances to it. And then when it doesn't need it, it can also scale it down. But it also looks at the deployments that are going on. Okay, so some considerations about all of this stuff, and I think we hinted at a few of them. I know David did also, but trust but verify, right? Copilot still requires developer oversight, right? So, or if you're not a developer and you're just used to building ARM templates in Bicep or Terraform or whatever it happens to be, your expertise is still required, right? Don't just trust what it's outputting. Because it can generate things with bugs.
So it's not going to take my job.
It's not going to take your job. So the way I think about it, it's more of an augmentation rather than taking stuff away. And it may be subtle bugs. Like I mentioned, when I tried this myself to convert my bash script to PowerShell, I didn't notice anything. But what it was, if I remember the code correctly, it had like some string array, and somehow it only got like, it was a string array of a list or something like that. And like it only got half of it. So it missed the other half somehow. And I didn't catch it until we tried to run it. And I mentioned about how important it is to make sure what you type in the prompt is as specific as you can make it, right? Otherwise, you may not get what you're intending. And then the last one is kind of funny, and I heard this on a podcast as well, but it's definitely happened to me, where you end up in this situation where Copilot will insist that it's fixed your stuff. And then you try it, and you still get a red error in the box in the terminal. It's like, well, you didn't fix it. And then it'll say, you're absolutely right, Pete. It's like, then you try it again. And then sometimes you'll do that a few times and then you're done, maybe just once. But there have been times, and I'll give you a reason why it happened to me personally, is because at Microsoft, we have these policies on our Azure environments where things like keys for storage accounts are disabled. And public access to those storage accounts is also disabled. And I was getting a bug with this hack that I mentioned that we built earlier, and that was the reason, because Microsoft has something that goes and turns those things off, and I had turned them back on so that this app would work. It got shut down, and I was messing with Copilot trying to figure out what was happening. Why am I getting this error? And it couldn't figure it out. Because it was looking at what I had open inside of GitHub Copilot, and everything to it looked fine because my bash script was still valid, right? But because of what was changed within the Azure environment, it didn't know that. So if you're not careful, you can end up like spending a lot of time in going down the rabbit hole on things that may not have anything to do with the code that you're trying to run. Could be an environmental issue. Now that was months ago. It's possible now. It might know. Because with the Azure extension, it's possible that it might be able to fix that. All right, last slide here is some resources to help you learn GitHub Copilot. As we mentioned at the beginning, we delivered some training that's based on this Mastering GitHub Copilot course for prepared programmers. It's got a lot of, I'll bring it up before we adjourn, but it's got a lot of different scenarios. I think it's great. But there are a few more. The GitHub Copilot blog is another good one, but let's go ahead and go there. So it's even got a video, I think, in the first one. Oh, sorry, I scrolled too quickly. But if you look at the top, you know, there's one on SQL, there's one on MCP, migrating languages.
It's easier reading in the table, a little bit lower. Right there.
Oh, thank you, that's right. So if you go to the getting started one, my screen, my mouse froze for a second there. Oh, that's weird. Okay. Yeah, so this video, this is on YouTube. That's a good one to get started. Reiterate some of the things we talked about today too, about the different agent modes, or sorry, different modes in Copilot chat. All right. With that, I think we're done. Any questions? I guess we have plenty of time for Q&A, right, David? It's about 7:30? 8:30. So we're good. Yes?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I want to go back to what David was talking about, how you can customize your GitHub Copilot responses using instructions.
Yes.
You don't have to just accept the default values that they said. You can change how you want to name your files. You can make specific instructions for languages like JavaScript, TypeScript.
Yeah, actually one of the... Yeah, so what he's asking is you don't have to just accept the defaults for what it's suggesting for things like for the custom instructions. You can specify those things. One of the examples in here has a part on it with the instructions, because I remember that part.
But really, all you have to do is you add a file called instructions.md. It's a new Copilot-instructions.md. Yeah, and in there, in natural language, in English, like just write some markdown and say, I always want to make constants uppercase, or I always want to use Hungarian notation, or when I create a web app, use the Angular libraries. Data access should use these libraries. Anything that is part of your coding standards or your way of doing your style or your way of doing things, put it in there, and the GitHub Copilot will read that. And as much as possible, try to follow those instructions. It's just a matter of adding a file in your repository. I think it's in the .ds folder.
It's in the .github folder, I believe.
Specific folder, I can put it, the documentation will tell you. And there's a naming convention,
Yeah, here we go.
Copilot-instructions.md.
Yeah.
You can,
This JavaScript one has a part on it, because I delivered this one. That's how I was, yeah, and so it talks about it. It is the .github directory. This is an example. It's in Markdown format, but you can tell it, like, use for JavaScript, it says use ES6 plus features and async await for asynchronous operations.
And if you forget how to do this, ask GitHub. I want to add custom instructions. How
Yeah.
do I do it? And it will tell you essentially how to create one. And then you can store it. And then you can give you an example.
and you can create them, you can create multiples. So you can say GitHub, or sorry, Copilot-instructions.javascript, things like that.
Yeah, so here's this one. The second one is not for everything. It's just for style sheets.
Yes.
So you could say apply to another one, let's say JavaScript.js or .java, right? And it would only apply to those file types.
Now, this is the GitHub proprietary way of doing this, GitHub Copilot proprietary way of doing this.
Yep.
There is a new standard that has been adopted widely called agents.md. Agents. GitHub now supports it. I would encourage you to go down that path instead of Copilot instructions because it is used across all of the coding agents. So Claude Code, Cursor, like everything uses the agents and these.
A similar idea.
Same idea.
The file or
It's
some
just, yep,
in
same idea.
English.
So if you just browse the agents.md in your browser, it'll take you to all of the agents.md like standards or how that works. So the other thing is MCP servers. So if you already have, what we find is an organization may already have all of this stuff documented somewhere in a wiki, in Confluence or what have you. So if you wrap that doc site in an MCP server and tie the MCP server in, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just go talk to your doc site and figure out what our standards are and things like that. So that's another approach to doing that. We find that's a pretty useful approach.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I would add a couple
Yeah.
things. So on your summary slide, one of the things that we find also super important is just the fundamentals of blocking and tackling the things that you should have always done. So good DevOps practices, good documentation practices. Because in your summary slide you had, hey, trust but verify. Well, how do
Yeah.
you verify?
Right.
Well, you verify by having good CI, CD, automated testing, things like that. So if you are not doing that well today, like just basic engineering sorts of things, then you're going to be left behind by those who are doing that well. Because they're going to be able to move so much faster because they're going to be able to, do all the automated deployments and testing to verify that the agents did the right thing. And so I would strongly encourage folks to kind of just level up their engineering maturity and practices to be able to take advantage of this well in a safe way.
Yeah. I mean, one thing too it's been going, but it seems to be getting more and more, is that you have agents that you can hook into GitHub itself. So, we just talked about doing the Markdown, which is the instructions for the Markdown, which is for GitHub Copilot itself. But what if I write bad code that doesn't follow these things and I push it into GitHub, right?
Yep.
What if I want something to go find that and say, hey, Pete, you did this, but you shouldn't have done that. I'm not going to accept your PR until you fix it. You could build an agent that did that. There's already one, actually. But, so that's something too. And the other thing I found that's useful is even when you put the instructions in there, you can ask it, hey, is my code itself following these things? Not just the code that GitHub Copilot wrote, but my code too.
Yep. Yeah, there's so many powerful things you can do with GitHub Copilot. So one of the things that you can also do, just like having the Copilot instructions files, you can have templates of things. And so you have you used it in a couple of scenarios, but you have the / command.
Yes, I didn't show that,
you
but
do
that's...
to launch up prompts or pre-built prompts and templates. And so then it'll start asking you to fill in the blanks. And so you can say, hey, I want to create a requirements doc, for example, for this feature, and use that template, and it will, whatever you've entered in there as this is required for this template, it will ask you for all of that interactively and help you fill that out, which is really helpful.
Yeah.
But we actually will use Copilot in a kind of a pre-step, if you will, and it's becoming a popular thing, like this whole idea of spec-driven development. But we will say, I want to deploy your small prompt that you had. I want to deploy a SQL server always on, all that sort of stuff. We will run that through Copilot first and say, hey, build me a requirements doc for this with all of the tasks. Like you do the planning, and then I can then feed that in.
Yeah.
But I have that fully fleshed out ahead of time, which is really useful in just defining the requirements as like a first step. So
Yeah.
yeah, cool stuff.
Yes. Our other thing is still going, so I'm glad we didn't wait. It was waiting for me to click allow. But yeah, it's updating the README markdown because it split the biceps into multiple bicep files, and so now the documentation is going to reflect that. But yeah, like, you could take a look at it. This is what this thing's doing.
Know how to do all this stuff. Think of the amount of time this is saving.
Yeah.
Writing that documentation. Even if it's still have to tweak it, it's only 90% done.
Yeah,
It's a lot of typing.
it is.
I'm certainly not a bicep expert.
The one cool feature that you didn't show off
Yes, tell me.
is the GitHub Copilot coding agent. And so I think it's worth mentioning at least, which is out in GitHub, out in the web UI,
Yeah.
you can have a repo, you can create issues in GitHub. So this is where you might want to run it through an LLM first to create like requirements. But then you create an issue, you assign it to Copilot.
Oh, and
It's
then,
not using your local machine cycles anymore.
yeah,
It's just running out using GitHub Actions. That's GitHub Actions orchestrates it. And it goes out and does all of this, but it doesn't touch your local machine's compute cycles. It just does it out in the cloud. It creates a branch for what it's creating off of your repo. When it's done, it creates a PR. It will go through and use whatever CI/CD pipelines you have already. So it might create, an Azure App Service. It might create a staging slot or something like that to deploy it into, so you can go preview it.
yeah,
It'll use things like Playwright, the Playwright MCP server, to launch up a browser, verify, like take screenshots, put it in its PR so you can review it. Like
Yeah.
all that cool stuff, but it just does it behind the scenes.
that is very cool.
And then you can review the PR. And
Yeah.
you can give it feedback and say, yeah, you got there like most of the way, but what about this?
Yeah.
And comment on it, and then we'll just pick it up and just keep making changes, just like a human would in a PR review. Which
That's
is
right.
really, really awesome.
Yeah,
But it's not like serial. It's not using your machine cycle. So you can go create like 20 issues and just say, go to town and create all these things. And come back and check on it. Like, yeah, that one's good. That one's not, just throw it away. It's fine.
Right.
It didn't cost you anything, like just do it again.
yeah.
So
Or it costs very little, because I guess technically you get charged for running a GitHub
Well, yeah,
action, but it's
you get charged for the
whatever.
actions,
It's not much. Rewinding a little bit, this is like a list of the slash commands. So if you wanted to, the one I've used is just like explain, and then it will do it. I forgot about start debugging. That's actually useful. But they're there, just hit slash. Any other questions? Yes.
How the request is counted for billing purposes? If I give one request but ask for a lot, is it going to be counted as one versus same output?
So within the chat, you're saying like, how does it charge based on how many steps, or like what we saw it kept going, right, for a while. I don't actually know that question. Yeah, I would expect it would be token. If it's just using, an LLM is using tokens, so it all depends how many tokens. But we should probably check on that, make sure. Because here it says like what's included, what's. If you don't mind me just trying it, let's see. It's meta, right? If I ask it itself, how do I get charge for things I type in this chat?
Change it to ask mode.
Thank you. That's going to reset it, but that's okay.
It would.
It would, but let's see what it does.
Like an agent mode is decide to like start creating files and stuff. So.
If you're using GitHub Copilot specifically, all right, well, there's at least a link. But it didn't tell me right in line. I do know about this because there are different GitHub Copilot SKUs depending on, both for individual as well as business use. Because the Pro one is $10 a month and it's unlimited. But what about for businesses? Well, it's either $19 or $39. So it doesn't seem like you're charged per token.
Yeah, I'm just curious how it does the premium requests, like what it does with those.
Options to purchase additional, yeah, I don't know. That's a good one. But yeah. Because I am wondering about the first thing that's up there, which says the response times may vary. We definitely saw that, right? So it can take longer sometimes.
Yeah, and that was the catalyst for the auto mode, is when that happens, at least you can get responses back.
Yeah.
More efficient models, so.
Yeah. Or is it more efficient or less frequently used? Like, because based on what you're saying, wasn't it like data center capacity of what it was trying to do? Which would make sense. Guess not. Thanks.
Pete, I gotta tell you, that was so good that I am gonna give you more beer.
Oh, thanks. It'll be a fun ride home.
On the train.
I'm taking the train, so. Thanks, David.
Open it right now, just shut it out.
No.
This is
All right. So a couple of things. We'll be back here again next month. What's the date, David?
on November the
Yeah.
5th.
Okay, Wednesday, November 5th, and it's Mary
Mary Gregleski.
Gregleski.
Presenting Event streaming and multi-agent AI for cloud native architectures.
So it sounds super interesting.
She has a long last name, she needs a long title.
Yeah, it's cloud native AI event streaming. So that's packed into the title. So I'm super curious. So that's happening. So you can go to ChicagoCloudUG, I think, .com, and that will take you directly to the meetup, just so you know, and then you can register. The other thing to mention is our Sessionize like CFP. So sessionize.com/Chicago Cloud Computing, I don't know, meetup? What is it?
Put a link on our website.
There might be a link. I don't know if there is or not. There might be a link on the meetup. But it's out in Sessionize, and so if you have something interesting, something you're working on that you think is awesome to share with the group, would welcome you to submit a session via Sessionize. And so as we keep going in like December, we don't have a session yet for, and so if you have some awesome ideas, feel free to submit it. We have two options, so you can submit just a short 10-minute lightning talk. If you guys have something you want to share that you think would be useful, we're gonna start, I think, throwing in lightning talks as we have them as like a session opener, if you will, so you can be the opening act. And then there's, if you have a 60, 75-minute talk that you want to share as well, feel free to submit that as well. So what was the sessionize.com/
I don't see a link to it on here, but it is, give me a minute.
Okay. I don't
know of any other important local sort of stuff going on. Sometimes we had the AI tour here a couple of weeks ago. There's a partner one tomorrow, yeah. So if you are a Microsoft partner, it's over at the Willis, yep. So if you're a Microsoft partner, there's the AI tour for partners tomorrow. But otherwise, yeah.
Sessionize.com/Chicago-cloud-computing-meetup.
Okay.
I should put a link to it.
Yeah, we'll put it on the meetup itself. Yeah. Yeah.
Please just pick up your plates. Cups, just heavy stuff before I
And if there's a session that you are curious about, if there's like a topic that you would like to see, feel free to just share that in the discussion on the meetup as well. And we can see if we can find a presenter along, or if you know somebody that you think would be a great presenter for the group. It doesn't have to be Microsoft focused. Actually, we would prefer that it's not Microsoft focused, because David and I and Pete, we all know the Microsoft stuff super well. But we actually want to learn about the other stuff too, that we're not exposed to every day. So if you have folks that are in the AWS space, the GCP space, or whatever it may be, we'd love to have that as well. So with that, thanks so much for coming out. Hopefully we'll see you again in November, next month. Thanks.